Good morning.
Good morning.
We have a team today. We've been trying to get them to come to CUC since February, and we got snowed out and iced out. And so we finally got them here. And this is Pam Baker, who lost her husband in 2021. And that started a whole new project for her. She's written a book with her nephew, Cameron. And Pam and Cameron are ready to present us a program that should address things for all of us.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm the Pam, obviously. I'm so excited to finally be here. I said the universe now has finally made the path. Good. We were just told we had a little extra time. Normally this presentation is about an hour, and we have 30 minutes, so we're going to talk fast, but not too fast. And we're gonna skip a few things, but we wanted to keep the slides in so you could see the other things that we talk about if you have questions after the fact. And we haven't done it since May, so hopefully we're not too rusty.
We took the summer off.
We took the summer off.
All right. Can you pull the presentation? Perfect. All right, you want to introduce yourself?
So again, I'm Pam Baker. My husband had glioblastoma brain cancer, was diagnosed in 2018 and lived for 3 years, half of that pretty healthfully, thankfully. And he was a very successful financial advisor. And I'm going to get into this story a little too early in this thing because I'm out of practice, but I'll just keep going. We had a big team. We had a CPA, a lawyer, we had all the things, we knew it was coming, and the whole probate process was still challenging for me, which is what started the idea for this book. I was like, if it's hard for me when I had time, I had professionals, I had a team, how does it look for someone whose person and whether any way you're financially connected just suddenly dies and you're left to do all of this stuff with probate, in a massive state of grief. So that's kind of where we started. I live in Roswell. I've been in Roswell since, we've had our house for almost 25 years. My kids have all gone through Roswell High School. I have 4 kids, 17 to 27. And that's awesome.
I'm Cameron. So I'm Pam's nephew, and I actually worked for John, her husband. I was able to do that for like 4 years until he passed away. And I was in a unique spot because, I was part of the family, but then I was also part of the business. So I was this like kind of walkie-talkie between the family and the employees and the clients. And like Pam said, we thought we had everything figured out until, we quickly realized after he passed, there's a lot of things that we were wondering, why didn't we do this when John was alive? This would be a lot easier. And so that really is where, we looked at each other and we're like, we got to document this. Otherwise, other people are going to go through the same pitfalls that we went through. So.
Do you want these passed out? Yeah.
You can. They're over there by the door. It was clippy.
Yeah. Sure. Oh.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, quick disclaimer. I always forget this part. So none of this is advice. It's all strictly educational. If you are trying to update any part of your financial plan, your taxes, anything like that, you need to talk to your CPA, your attorney, your financial advisor. So don't say Cameron told me to do this.
So we did write a book. I bribed Cameron to write it with me because
Where's the money?
I didn't give you anything. I just said, do it or you're grounded. I'm a storyteller, and but I realized quickly that my advice was based on nothing because I had no knowledge of how to do it. I just know how to tell a good story. So Cameron's a financial planner. He's a certified financial planner. So I was like, will you please come write this with me? So each of these chapters, you can see we cover everything from like where to store your passwords to how to document what you want for your celebration of life to how you create a business continuation plan, because my husband had his own business and we had to do that. So we cover a lot in this book, But our goal was to make it very digestible, very easy to take in because, oh yeah, thank you. We have this book and then we have a workbook that goes right along with it. So chapter by chapter, you can make sure you have all your ducks in a row. So you're leaving the people you leave behind with the best gift you could give them, which is just to be able to like honor you and sit in their grief and in their memory of you without having to do all the business of death. Yeah, which is a big gift. And so I read a lot of books after John died because I was very adamantly against, I thought that's your job. You're the financial planner. I don't want to do any of that. So I didn't have a lot of knowledge, but I read a lot because I didn't want to be taken advantage of. And they were all very boring and very clinical and very cold. So we purposely made, you can tell, we wanted a really pretty book and we wanted it to be very aesthetically pleasing and very easy to digest. So we purposely wrote this book to feel like you're sitting down having a cup of coffee with a friend. And so each chapter starts with Pam and I give a little story and then Cam and he comes in with the professional thoughts. So we're going to get through as much as we can, but obviously not the whole book.
So today's agenda, we plucked out kind of the high level stuff out of the book that is, punchier stuff you can act on today. So we'll go through the basics of the estate plan, which most people are familiar with, and then probate pitfalls. So like where you can get yourself into trouble if the plan isn't talking or in sync with each part of it. We'll talk about engaging the next generation, which a lot of people are uncomfortable with. This is, bringing in the kids, bringing in the grandkids. That way everybody's on the same page and everything's kind of out in the open before, anything bad happens. And that way it helps you to identify gaps in your own plan. We'll talk about taxes. This is one of the topics that we'll have to, breeze through a little bit more than normal, just because we don't have the time to go in depth on it. And then we'll talk about some resources that are a good starting point if you don't know where to go.
So a lot of people, we found a lot when we're doing these, people think estate plan and they think estate plans are just for the wealthy. Well, they're not. There's your will, there's all these different components of what an estate plan is. And you can see it's a will, a trust, your beneficiary designations, that's a big one, your power of attorney, your medical directive, and your HIPAA release form. And those are all great to have in place, but you need to also make sure they're all talking to each other and they're cohesively put together to make your whole plan. That's an estate plan. So people literally think, oh, I don't have that much money, I don't need an estate plan. That is all part of your estate plan. So everyone needs an estate plan. So, and normally we go into these roles a little more in depth, but how much do you want to go into those?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
And then I think a great starting point, if a lot of people we talk to are like, oh, I already have mine set up, I'm good to go. So we recommend, every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, do a fire drill, right? So if you are incapacitated right now, go through your estate plan. Is it easy to navigate? If someone coming in, your power of attorney, are they able to pick it up and know exactly what you want to have happen? If not, you might need to do a little bit of tweaking to the estate plan. Have people in your estate plan passed away? Have new grandkids been born? We need to make sure that it's up to date. And so, every 2 to 3 years is a good kind of time frame on reviewing it. Take it out of the safe, dust it off, and just make sure it's still valid and your wishes are still in there. Oh, we're stuck again. So choosing your team, there are 2 kind of aspects to a team in your estate plan. There's going to be your professional team, which is like your CPA, your financial advisor, your attorney, and then there'll be your personal team. And these are people that don't have to necessarily be professionals that you're paying. It's usually a family member, a close friend, but you want to make sure that everybody's in knowledge of what's going to happen in the estate plan, and that your personal team and your professional team know each other. Because the worst thing to do when you're grieving is to try to figure out where are all these accounts, how do I contact the advisor, how do I locate these different bank accounts and close them out. And so if everybody is more aware of who the different players are, it can make the whole kind of process of the business of death, as Pam was saying, much be able to get through the probate process, get accounts closed down, and alleviate a lot of that stress. So CPA, EA, enrolled agent, this is the person that's going to prepare your taxes. Most of the time people just talk to their CPA once a year, but there's also CPAs out there that are tax planners, and they're able to forecast, what happens down the road if we, make certain tweaks to your finances today and how much taxes can we save in the future? What can we do to save taxes for your beneficiaries? And so if you're working with a CPA right now that's just offering tax plan or tax preparing, you give them your documents and they give you a tax return, and you want more of a tax planner, you need to have a conversation with your CPA and see if they offer those services, or do you need to look for a CPA elsewhere? A lot of people just think because they've been working with someone for forever that they're stuck with them, right? But and a lot of the times, the CPA will change what they're doing for you if you just talk to them. They don't know that you want something else if you don't have the conversation with them. Attorneys, you're probably not going to have a relationship with your estate planning attorney. That's just kind of the business of the nature, or the nature of the business. You're going to, do the estate plan, and then they're going to keep a copy for you, and you probably won't have any more contact with them until you either update the estate plan or you pass away and someone in your family contacts them for help probating the estate. But it's always good if you have a CPA relationship or you have an advisory relationship to, maintain contact with them throughout the year, keep them updated on how is income changing, has your beneficiary plan changed? Do we need to allocate money to different people? And like I said, don't settle on whatever the relationship is currently. Make sure that whatever service that you're looking for, you're receiving from these people. And if you're not, like, look elsewhere. Start interviewing other professionals, because there are professionals out there that will give you exactly what you want. And then on the, kind of personal side of the team, there's all these different roles that your estate plan will designate as well. The big ones here are the power of attorney. And I guess the like main takeaway here is a lot of people just pick, their sister, and she'll be power of attorney for medical and finances. But we want to pick the best people for the role. So, they can be different people in your life. They don't have to be the same. And I would stress that you don't need to feel bad about not picking somebody for a certain role because you think it's going to hurt their feelings. You want to pick the best person for the job because that's going to alleviate a lot of stress for everybody down the road. And then most of these documents, they only come into effect if you're incapacitated. So a lot of people are scared about naming a financial power of attorney because they think that they're going to have access to all of their bank accounts and things. That only comes into play if you're unable to make decisions for yourself. Okay, so you can kind of take that pressure off yourself as well. You want to keep going? You have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say too, guardians, at this stage, myself included, we don't really have to think about guardians for your children because my youngest is 17, almost 18, but also your pets. And people don't really think about that because what's going to happen to your pets if you don't have someone assigned? They're going to end up at the pound or something. So think about that. And then when it goes to doing those relationships, that's one of the things, again, I kind of said to John all the time, I'm like, that's your job. Well, that came back and bit me in the butt a little bit because I didn't have the relationships with his employee or his staff. I didn't have a relationship with our accountant. I didn't have a relationship with our lawyer, and I knew them, but I didn't have a relationship. And so it's really important if, you typically in a relationship, someone's the financial person and they pay the bills, and someone, each of us have our roles. But even if it's not your role, I would encourage you to form those relationships because, again, when you're grieving, that's not the time to go in and have those conversations. And I'm just going to tell a quick story. With our lawyer, we had him forever. And my oldest two have cystic fibrosis. So my husband had set up a special needs trust for our kids. And when I went to my lawyer and said, our lawyer, and I was like, we don't need to have that anymore. Times have changed, thankfully, with the CF world, and we don't need to have that in place anymore. And he wouldn't listen to me because I didn't have the relationship. So he kept defaulting. This is what John wanted. This is what John wanted. This is what John wanted. And so we clashed, and I think that if we had had a relationship, that wouldn't have happened. And, I kind of, it's not a joke, it's true. I kind of dealt with their way of thinking, including our accountant, who just kept defaulting to the way John did it. And we got through probate, and then I fired everybody and built my own team.
Girl.
And so a lot of the challenges that we lay out in the book are to point out the things that could go wrong in the probate process if you don't have the proper estate plan in place. The first being probate. So probate is in Georgia, it's not too lengthy, depending on how complex the the estate is, but it's public, right? So anybody that has, or anybody can get access to the court records, they can see exactly what assets or properties were transferred to your beneficiaries. And that opens up a lot of liability. So if there's bad actors, if there's a spouse that's trying to, divorce to get the assets, they know exactly who got what in the estate plan. The way you avoid that is through beneficiary designations or through a trust. So those assets that you pass through trust or through beneficiary designations will flow outside of the probate process. And so that's no longer in the court record. Also protecting them against creditors, against if they're, having bankruptcy issues, creditors will be able to see how much money they got, they can go after them. It's better. I'm sure everybody could agree. They don't want their business all out in the public sphere. So if you can, pass assets without going through that process, that's preferable. It can also be costly, right? So usually you're hiring an attorney, they're charging you by the hour, they're going to court, they're filling out the paperwork. If you can cut down what needs to be probated, the whole process will shrink, and then your heirs are having to pay the attorney for less of their time. And then they're also getting, their assets faster as well, because when it's, let's say you have a bank account, right, and it needs to be probated, your heirs can't access any money in that account until it's gone through the probate process. And so that can create a lot of stress on people if, let's say, there was a medical emergency and there's bills piling up and they don't have the money to pay for your end of life ceremonies. And if we can get them the money faster, that alleviates a lot of those worries as well. And then it can also lead to unintended outcomes, right? So if you don't have a proper estate plan, you're really leaving it in the hands of the probate court to decide how your assets are divvied up. And it's all state law based, so there's different, who's in line for what. But it can lead to your assets going somewhere where you maybe didn't necessarily intend for them to go. So if you have a cousin out there that you definitely don't want to get your money, you want to make sure that your estate plan's buttoned up, because there is a chance that the judge or the probate court could decide, they're next in line, they get the assets. So make sure that, your money goes where you want it to go.
Question.
Yes.
If you've got a living trust or a living will or whatever, and everything is protected, say, in the living trust, does it still have to go to probate, or?
Good question. So technically
What was that question?
Oh, sorry. I always forget that. He said if you have a living trust and all of your assets are designed to flow into that trust after you pass away, do you still have to go through probate? And the answer technically is yes, but there's nothing to probate, right? And so it's a very quick process. Anything left out of that trust would then need to be probated. Usually if you don't retitle the deed of your house into the trust, the house would need to be probated, but all of your kind of financial assets would pass through that trust, and those would be able to bypass the probate process. And then cash flow issues. So this comes up a lot with, married couples on Social Security, right? You go from having 2 Social Security payments to whoever had the highest one. But what we tend to see is that whoever the living spouse's expenses don't usually go down, right? And so their income is almost halved, or usually halved, and their expenses don't go down. So where are they pulling the money from? Usually from an IRA, right? What does that do? Triggers more taxes. And so that gets you into this thing we call the widow tax. So it's not an official tax from the IRS that they charge to widows, right? But it happens because you're having to pull more money out of IRA to maintain the same level standard of living. And then that kicks off more taxes, and then you got to pay the tax bill. So you pull out more money from the IRA to pay the tax bill. And it's just kind of a repeating process. And so the way around that is you got to start being strategic. And this is where the tax planning comes into place, where you can start moving money around before the first spouse dies, from IRA to Roth IRA, for example. And then it gives you more tax-free money to pull from and to help alleviate with this widow tax issue. And then another cash flow issue is credit cards, right? So if you have joint credit cards and maybe one of the person's an authorized user and the other person's the account holder, well, a lot of people don't know when that account holder passes away, the authorized user loses access to that account. So that's a big headache for a lot of people if they don't have, like,
If it's a joint.
if it's a joint, you should be good. But most credit cards nowadays aren't joint credit cards. We kind of found that out. You can have an authorized user on it, but that's not the same thing as a joint. But if it's a joint bank account, right, you'd be fine. They'd still be able to access that bank account. You just have to be really, that's part of the fire drill process too, is make sure that the first person to pass away, the other person's gonna have access to pay liquidity to pay the bills.
But as long as the bank account is joint, you're okay.
You should be fine. Yes. Yeah. And then let's see here. I think that's pretty much it.
How about the taxes from the standpoint of inheritance and stuff like that. Is there ways to avoid that kind of thing when assets are being reassigned to, the children or whatever?
So the question was how to minimize taxes for beneficiaries, correct? I have a slide a little bit later. I'll get more into that. And then disinherited heirs, this is a big one we see a lot. So I'll go to the next slide here. So beneficiary designations, a lot of people don't know, but these actually trump whatever your estate plan says, whatever your trust says. They will pass automatically. And so what we see a lot is 401ks, right? People have an old 401k, and a lot of the times they'll have an ex-spouse as still the beneficiary, and they don't know that. And so what would happen if they passed away, even if, the will says like she gets nothing, guess what? She's still getting the 401k because you never updated your beneficiaries. And so accounts that have beneficiary designations are like IRA, Roth IRA, 401k, 403b, any sort of like longer term investment account, life insurance policies, and then qualified annuities. Those will all have beneficiary designations. And so if you have a trust, right, you can make the trust the beneficiary, and then you never have to worry about it again. Or you can name specific individuals as beneficiary. Then that's where the fire drill comes in also. So you want to audit those, make sure that they match what your estate plan says. And then there's also things called POD, TOD. So payable on death, transfer on death. Same thing as a beneficiary designation, but it's for taxable accounts. So things like bank accounts, taxable brokerage accounts. They just call it a different name. It's the same like kind of legal standing. It'll pass outside of probate. And then non-qualified annuities. And then starting in 2024, you can actually put these on properties now in Georgia. I've talked to the attorney that we, use in a lot of these seminars. His advice is that it's okay if it's a very simple situation, like you're passing the house to one person. Anything more than that, you probably want to be using some sort of trust system instead of the property TOD.
Question
Yes.
on the beneficiary aspect. I was told you could not put an IRA in a trust because it had a beneficiary.
Because it has a beneficiary.
Yeah. Now, was he trying to tell me that I didn't need to, or that I couldn't?
Probably that you didn't need to.
Because I sent him information to put it in the trust and he didn't do it. And the reason was
Yeah.
he
So
couldn't.
yeah. So what happens is, we'll get into that in a second too. There's different rules for IRAs with the IRS. And if it's a non-spouse inheriting the IRA, they have 10 years to liquidate the account. But in that situation, what you would do is you just you'd have the trust kind of split into different mini trusts for whoever the beneficiary is. If you have a beneficiary designation on the IRA, he maybe was saying you don't need to put it in the trust. But you can always make the trust the beneficiary of the IRA, and then from there, the trust would dictate how it's split out between the different beneficiaries. Yeah. Another example of disinherited heirs. So when you go to make these beneficiary designations, there's two boxes usually, and it'll say per stirpes and per capita. And most people say, I don't know what that is. I'm just going to leave it to default. But there's a difference. So per stirpes means by the root in Latin, and per capita means by the head. And so if you look at this example, I don't know if you'll be able to hear me, but so we have Barb at the top. She's the account owner. And then she had 3 kids, Jay, Grace, and Hunter. Okay. Jay has 2 kids, Nick and Lynn. And so in this example, Jay, her son, passed away before her, but she never updated her beneficiaries. So when she passes away, what most people I feel like intend to happen is that any money that was supposed to go to Jay would now go to his kids. Okay. So most people would, be comfortable with that. That's how per stirpes is set up. In per capita, however, same example, Jay predeceases Barb. She never updates her plan. She passes away. Well, now Jay's kids, Nick and Lynn, are now cut off, right? They didn't get Jay's piece because it's redistributed to the 2 remaining surviving heirs. And now they're depending on, Aunt Grace and Uncle Hunter to be benevolent and be nice and give them their money. But what we tend to see is, death makes people very weird. They get jealous, they get greedy. And so we don't want to leave that up to Aunt Grace and Uncle Hunter, right? We want to make sure that if Barb was intending for the money to go to Nick and Lynn, that's how we need to update the beneficiaries. Any questions with that? Because that usually opens up some questions. Trust. So if you go to an estate planning attorney, they're probably going to give you a trust. Does everybody need a trust? Probably not. Most people will use one just because it's an easy, planning tool, and you can direct all of your assets into that trust, and then it can be distributed from there, bypasses probate. But if you have a super simple plan, right, there's probably ways you can design your estate plan without having to use a trust. I'm not saying if you go to an estate plan attorney, they're not trying to scam you with a trust. That's not what I'm saying. It's just not 100% of people will need one. Trusts are very complicated because they are so customizable. You can design a trust to do whatever you want, and so we don't have time to go into like every nuance in this short presentation. But the biggest two categories are revocable versus irrevocable. So most people will have a revocable trust. That's like your living trust, and that means you can change it while you're still alive. It's pretty easy to change. Irrevocable is harder to change because they're taking the assets that you're going to put in that trust out of your own name, and now they belong to the trust. It has its own social security number now, and it's much more difficult to change if you change your mind or want to cut someone out. And so most people are going to go that revocable trust route. Benefits are anonymity, like I was saying, bypasses probate, protections. So if you have a spendthrift heir, or you have someone that's not dependent and they need protection from themselves from spending all the money, you can really put as many rules as you want on this trust, where they can only access the funds for these certain requirements. Or a lot of what we see now is goal-based trusts, so they can use the money to buy a house, they can use the money to go to college, they can use the money to start a business, and less so these days on the age-based stuff. So it used to be like, you turn 30, you get a chunk of money, you turn 40, you get a chunk of money. Now it's more goal-based, where they can use it for certain things, and if they don't do those things, then it stays in the trust for the next generation. Really helps reduce infighting. So if you just leave all your stuff, to the probate court, and they're deciding who gets what, there's going to be a lot of hurt feelings, because there's going to be stuff that people wanted that they didn't get. And it's a lot of times it's the silliest things. You have a good story about this.
So my mother-in-law's family has had a family cottage up in a lake in Canada for forever, generations. And her business back a while ago had some trouble financially. One of our partners was embezzling money from the business, and they ended up going bankrupt. Well, the cottage in Canada was tied to her personally, so it was going to be caught up in the bankruptcy. Well, her sister came and bought her part out to save the family cottage, with the idea that then she could buy back in. Never let her buy back in. She got her, and so as you can imagine, now it's decades of infighting and family, weirdness. And so my husband and I bought a lake house 20 something years ago. And because of that example, my lake house is now in a trust, so that my kids won't ever have to deal with that. Like, it is set up to always be taken care of. There's nobody like, well, I spent all the money fixing the roof, now it's more my house, and you don't have the money to do this. Now, hopefully, I mean, they might fight about something else, but they won't be able to fight about the lake house, and the lake house will always be protected. And that's just something, like, as a personal, I've seen what it's done to other people in our family to try to avoid future issues with my kids with that particular house. So that's an example of where a trust like that can become very handy.
Yep. And so part of the handouts there's a front side and a back side. We pulled these straight out of the workbook and book. And so you can fill that out at home, and it kind of walks you through leading questions to figure out, is a trust something I should be thinking about, and why haven't I considered it before? So that's a lot of the information in the book each chapter has questions at the end, and they're designed to get you thinking. The whole point of it is for you to identify gaps yourself, so that you can get the help that you need, either from a CPA or an advisor or an attorney. Okay. So bringing in the next generation, we suggest to everybody doing an estate planning organizer, and this can be pretty simple, or you can make it as complicated as you want. But essentially, it's everything that's not in these formal documents. So there's a lot of things, right? Yeah, like how you want your end of life ceremony. Do you want music? What songs do you want played? How big do you want it? What kind of food do you want? Who do you want invited? All of that kind of stuff is not necessarily in these formal documents. And then you can also write in there what we call a family love letter. So if you don't feel comfortable talking to your kids or grandkids about this stuff while you're alive, you can leave an explanation of why you set up the estate plan this way, what you're hoping to accomplish with it, and it gives them a good roadmap into your brain and your thinking of why you set stuff up, so they're not like, why did they set it up this way? It alleviates a lot of that kind of thinking, pondering stuff. Also overly communicating your plans. So once it's all set up and you're comfortable, if you're comfortable. Go through it with the players in your plan, right? Don't make someone power of attorney and not tell them that you made a power of attorney.
Especially.
Or executor, that's like the worst job ever. You don't want to be a surprise executor, I'm telling you that. So you want to make sure that they're comfortable, that you want to make sure that they have enough knowledge where, you know, you get in a car accident and you're not there to walk them through it, that at least they'll know like where the accounts are, how to access them, or at least who to contact, right? Just say, call this guy, call this girl. And then they'll be able to go from there. In this estate planning organizer, you know, a lot of people will document where all the different accounts are, how to access them. If you have a list of common passwords or security questions is a big one that we ran into. Document, you know, who was your high school mascot? You know, what street did you grow up on? Things like that. It can alleviate a lot of the issues down the road. Identifying specific items, right? So this goes outside of just financial accounts. If you have a, you know, skillet that's been in your family forever, right? I've seen this, literally this example. People will fight over that, I promise you. So you want to make sure that you're, yeah, mixing bowls, anything, any kind of family heirloom. You want to make sure that people understand that this person's going to get this and this person's going to get that. And you have a funny story with the safe.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't mention this, but I started in 2023, I started a social group for widows called Widows Who Whine. And, you know, there's a lot of grief groups for widows, but there's not a lot of social. I say, you know, we're going from surviving to thriving. So I've gotten a chance to meet a lot of widows. There's almost 500 women in my group. And one of the widows told me a story when her parents died. She had two siblings and they just literally ransacked the house and took everything. And by the time she got there to claim like what she wanted from her parents, the only thing left was one of those old fashioned, like super tall safes that weighed like 12,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And because they couldn't move it out of the house, that was the only thing that was left. So that's what she got, because nothing was designated. There was no letter left behind. Like, I want each of you to get this. So you don't want that happening.
What was in the safe?
Yeah.
Sorry, honest.
I think they probably emptied that out. They left the same. And so yeah, it's really important to identify this stuff. Make sure everybody's in the loop. Don't just tell that one person, because then that also, you know, they're like, oh, she didn't tell you that, you're lying. You just wanted that. So you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And then also don't gift people appreciated property, right? So I do have an example which I'll try to get to, but it's better to, if something's a highly appreciated piece of property, like a piece of art or some jewelry, it's better to leave that behind than to gift it to them while they're alive, because there might be taxes due, and I'll show you on that.
What do you mean by leave it behind?
So leave it in your estate plan, either in your will or
you die instead of before you die.
yeah, especially with houses. A lot of the times I see people when they get older, they'll put their kid on the deed of the house, and what that does, I'll show you.
Makes them an owner.
Yeah, exactly. So there's another questionnaire on the other side of that form. And it's all about what can I do to make the process easier after I pass away. So it's some stuff that people just don't really think about. So we can go through those as well. So we'll get right into it right now. So passing assets to the next generation. The big thing here is just kind of high level overview. Tax wise, your pre-tax accounts, which is the money that you're putting in that you're getting a tax break on when you were working. So like 401k, IRA. I think you guys are all pretty familiar. When you take that money out of the account, there's income tax due. Okay. Whereas post-tax Roth IRA, you already taxed on that when you put the money in. That's why there's no tax when you take it out. Taxable accounts are a little bit different, right? So you don't pay money on the money you take out of the account. You pay money on the profits you make in that account every year. And they get a really cool thing when you pass away called a step up in basis. And this applies to houses, art, jewelry, anything of value that's a piece of property. The step up in basis is a really powerful tool, because let's say you bought Coca-Cola stock for $1, 50 years ago, and now it's worth $100. If you gave that Coca-Cola stock to your grandkids, your kids today, and they sell it, they're going to owe taxes on the $99 of profit, okay, which can create a huge tax bill for them. But if you wait until you pass away and then give it to them in your will, they can sell it the next day and there's no tax due, right? So you can save a lot of money for your heirs if you just set it up properly and don't gift it to them while you're alive. There's also on pre-tax accounts, it's called the 10-year rule. And so if a non-spouse inherits that IRA, that's a kid, grandkid, niece, nephew, they have to distribute all the money out of that IRA within 10 years. And so a lot of people receive their inheritance in their prime earning years. And then they also have this giant account to liquidate, right? And that all gets added to their income. And so it can really blow up their income taxes for that time period that they're trying to distribute the money out of. So I talked about earlier about some strategies on that. Also, converting money from pre-tax to post-tax. So moving money from IRA to Roth IRA. These are very complicated, planning scenarios that you should consult a professional on, because you can really mess up your own income tax for whatever year you're trying to do it. And you want to be very strategic of when you're moving those assets.
Have you got time to talk about the depends on the annuities?
Let's see, how much time do we have?
A good 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay.
Well,
5 minutes.
If you don't, that's fine, move on.
I mean, so it depends, because annuities are just weird pieces of planning. Like, they're just weird accounts. And so it depends on if it's a qualified annuity versus a non-qualified annuity. Non-qualified meaning taxable, qualified meaning IRA. There's just different depending on like what the growth was in the account, how much of it's going to be taxed, when it's going to be taxed. I can certainly dive deeper into that another time. That's an example of what I just talked about with leaving the asset behind and not gifting it to them when you're still alive. And this is the example of the house. And so what a lot of times, like I was saying, people will add their kids to the deed of their house when they're alive. That makes them co-owner. And then when they go to sell it, the cost basis from the parent actually transferred over. And so there's going to be a lot more tax due, whereas it would be a lot better if you left the house behind to them, because then they get that step up in basis and they could sell the house with no taxes due. Okay, so I know I went through that quick. I'll talk about it after if you guys have questions. But just put in your brain, probably don't gift away appreciated assets. And I'll skip that too.
Yes.
Yes.
Bill said that we can go until 10 minutes too, because he said that he's trying to shift the timing so that we don't have so long a time before having to go down to the.
Okay.
So if we can give him 10 more minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll go through that example then. That's a good one. Okay, so in this example, we have the top row as an example, the bottom row as an example. The top one is what we see a lot. So Kelly buys a house at age 28 for $50,000. And when she's 58, the house is now worth $500,000. Okay, so a pretty typical scenario a lot of people are in. They bought a house a long time ago, it's worth more today. She then gives it to her grandson, Jonathan. She's like, oh, I don't need this house, or she adds him to the deed. It's essentially the same thing if you add someone to the deed or you just give it to him outright. When he's 18, so he gets gifted this $500,000 house. Well, Jonathan goes to sell it a couple years later. It's now worth $550,000. The issue is that Kelly's original cost basis, that $50,000 from when she was 28, carries over to Jonathan because she was still alive when she gifted him that property. And so when he sells it for $550,000, he's going to owe capital gain tax on $500,000. Probably no one wants that. I don't know anybody that would. So the better way to do this is the bottom example. So the inheritance scenario. So same beginning. Kelly buys the house for $50,000 when she's 28. She passes away, and the day she passes away, the house is worth $500,000. That's left to Jonathan in the will or through a trust or however she got it to him. So he inherits a $500,000 house, but because she left it behind him through her estate plan, the cost basis is no longer $50,000. The cost basis is what the house is worth on the date of Kelly's death. So now it's worth $500,000. So if he goes and sells it for $550,000, he only owes capital gains on $50,000 instead of $500,000. So we're cutting that tax bill down to 10% of what it would have been. So that's how you save your heirs a lot of money. So that's one example. I know there's a house on here, but you can think about the same thing with stock, with art, with any kind of collectible. It's all treated the same way. Any questions with that? Tax optimization, we've talked about this too. This really has to do with Roth conversions, and looking at if you have different beneficiaries and you want to leave money to a charity or a church, right? We can be strategic about what pools of money we leave to each person. The big thing here, charities don't pay taxes, right? And so we can leave behind the IRA money, the pre-tax money, to the charity, and leave the Roth assets, the taxable assets that are tax-free to our heirs, to the non-charity heirs. And then everyone ends up better, and the charity's not hurt. The charity's still getting the same amount of money. So in this example, Sue is the top earner here. So she's in the 35% tax bracket. She's in her prime earning years. And then Bob, let's say he's retired already, so he's in a 12% tax bracket. And then there's a charity, which is in a 0% tax bracket. And if the account owner has an IRA of 300,000, a taxable account of 300,000, and a Roth of 300,000, what most people do is they talk to their advisor and they're like, oh, I want to leave a third of my money to charity. I want to leave a third of my money to Bob. I want to leave a third of my money to Sue. And so what they'll do is they'll set up, 1/3 of each account to each person. But what we can see is because Sue's in such a high tax bracket, she only gets 265,000 of her 300,000. Whereas, if we were a little bit more strategic and we left the IRA to the charity and the Roth to Sue and the taxable to Bob, everybody's getting their full 300,000. And so we're, saving a lot of money from the IRS and using just a little bit of forethought and planning on who gets what money.
So the business of death, the importance of, we'll just go through this quickly. Again, we mentioned your celebration of life, your funeral arrangements. I can't stress enough that you write those down, and that's coming from personal experience as well. We ended up having some also infighting when you don't want to be fighting, when everybody's grieving and everybody's highly emotional. Members of our family had very strong opinions about what my husband's should look like, even though he and I discussed it very thoroughly. We had time, and there's still like lingering issues with that 5 years later. So write it down, even if you both know, just write it down so that other people can't say that's just what you want, not what he wanted. I don't remember.
Or Hosper death certificates.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm like, what were the do's and don'ts? The number one thing is death certificates. You're gonna need way more of those than you think. So when you go get them, order 15 or whatever, have those. Again, it's just like your personal team. Versus your professional team. Who's going to be the person that's going to be, I say, your wingman? Who's going to be the one that can call the funeral home and take care of things? Who can start the meal train? Who can start the telephone tree or whatever it is? Have those people in place ahead of time. And for the record, all of this stuff is not just for your spouse. It's anyone you have a financial tie to. So it's your siblings, it's your children, it's your spouse, it's your parents, it's your business partner. Anyone, all of this is applicable to anyone that you have any kind of financial tie to. So just keep that all in mind as you're going as well.
Another good do and don't. It's a don't. Or I guess it's not a don't. It's be very careful when after someone passes away and you call into whatever financial institution. Be very careful of when you're telling them that person passed away, because as soon as they know that they're gone, they're going to freeze the account. You're not going to be able to access it, and so you want to go in there, make sure you get whatever statements you need. Make sure if there's lots of credit card points, you want to be able to transfer those points out. You're going to lose everything, right? And so before you call in, think you're doing the right thing, telling Schwab that this person passed away. Make sure you have everything that you need out of that account. It's also, a lot of people do it, but it's technically fraud if you're using someone else's bank account or credit card after they pass away. You're not supposed to be doing that. That's where making sure there's a liquidity comes into play, so that you're not having to commit fraud to pay the landscaper, right? So make sure that you're being very strategic on who you're telling, when you're telling them, because a lot of it's undoable. Once you tell them, you're cut off. And I would say that's pretty much the big ones right there. I guess we don't really need to tell a story about.
No, I usually tell a lot more stories. That's why he's doing so much talking. Yeah, but we won't be.
Let's go to the next. Oh, you click on the thing. Yep. So we have a sign up sheet over there. It's a free newsletter, and then it also will send you this financial first aid kit. It's a good starting point of a first stab at a financial planning organizer. It would work for a lot, like 90% of people. And that'll get automatically emailed to you if you sign up for the newsletter. And we also do a lot of these seminars, workshops, and we do it for different groups. So we'll do, HOAs, church groups, neighborhood groups, book clubs, professional, client events with realtors, or, pretty much anybody that'll have us that has an audience that would benefit from this. And we're able to curate the content based on, audience and age and expertise and all that stuff. So if you have anybody that would benefit, they're completely free. Just let us know and we'll be happy to talk to them.
I mentioned the Widows Who Whine group. I have a private Facebook group and website, and would love to have anybody join us. We have everyone from very young widows, unfortunately, all the way up to like 95, and we do lots of stuff. We have a once a month dinner, trivia, dancing. I do a social event every month, and then we have a great group that's Widows Who Travel. So we've been to Costa Rica and Iceland, and Croatia group is going in October. So if you have any interest in that, let me know.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Just a quick question, so if you were to put together a package for a family here, what's approximate the range of cost that it would be?
So the question was, how much does it cost for an estate plan for a typical family? Depends on the complexity of the trust that you're implementing. I would say most people are paying from $2,000 to $4,000. And then if you were gonna go like a irrevocable trust, you're looking at more like $15,000. But for most people, they can get all the documents in place for like $2,000 to $4,000. Yep.
I want to thank you both for being here
course.
today. And if there are more questions, we'll dismiss, and then you personally can come up and ask more questions.
And we do have books here. If you are interested, they're on Amazon, but we have them too. You get a little bit better deal if anybody's interested. We're gonna hang around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
More of these because.
More printouts?
Thank you.
I can email them to you. And then if you want to distribute those, does that work? Okay.
How much are the books?
So the deal that we do in person, you get both for 20. Or individually, I think the book is $16.99 and the workbook is $13.
Again, thank you very much.